All right, ready to dive into some fascinating stuff. We've got reports, firsthand accounts, even the official guide for this ACRC Coastal Rowing Beach Sprint Party.
Sounds intriguing. Definitely not your run-of-the-mill rowing event, from what I'm gathering.
Yeah, this is about as far from those serene river races as you can get. We're talking starting on the beach, navigating a slalom course out there in the open water.
And then sprinting back to the finish line on the sand. It's a whole other ballgame.
Exactly. And it seems like the shift towards a more, shall we say, adventurous and unpredictable style of rowing is really fueling coastal rowing's surge in popularity.
Absolutely. It's like people want their water sports with a side of adrenaline these days.
Right.
And this beach sprint format, talk about adding a whole new layer, not just physically, but strategically to the sport.
Speaking of strategy, let's talk about this ACRC Beach Sprint Party. The Deelnemers Handlijn, basically the participants' guide for the event.
Right, that guy.
It lays out the whole schedule, and it's pretty clear this event was about way more than just who could row the fastest.
Oh, for sure.
Huge emphasis on, camaraderie. They even mixed up rowers from different clubs and randomly assigned them to teams.
Wow. Imagine showing up to a race not even knowing who your teammates were going to be.
Right. Talk about pressure. That's like, pickup basketball, but on a water.
Exactly. You're thrown together with a bunch of strangers. You got to figure out everyone's strengths, weaknesses, adapt, think on your feet. Probably makes for some pretty good stories, too.
And speaking of challenges, this slalom course they had set up, the guide was describing these buoys like 85 meters apart, sharp turn at each one.
And then factor in the wind.
Yeah. One of the reports even mentioned wind cracked 4. Pretty sure that translates to a stiff breeze, at least. Can you imagine trying to navigate that with a boatload of essentially new acquaintances?
It's like the rowing equivalent of a tightrope walk.
Yeah.
Balance, precision, a little luck, all essential ingredients. And you're right, that wind adds a whole other layer of complexity. Coastal rowing, especially on the North Sea, with those infamous choppy conditions.
Yeah, not exactly known for its tranquility.
Exactly. You got to have almost a sailor's mindset, reading the water, anticipating those gusts, constantly adjusting your course.
They actually provided a helpful little visual of the slalom course. Let me see if I can. Here it is.
Oh, yeah, let me see that.
See what I mean about the turns?
Wow.
Those are tight, almost like hairpin turns on a racetrack.
Yeah, it definitely adds to the challenge.
So you've got to find that balance between maintaining your speed, executing a clean turn, all while battling the wind, potentially choppy water, real test of skill, teamwork. And the way they structure the competition itself, that got pretty interesting too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the guide outlines a few different scenarios depending on the number of teams. Could be anywhere from 5 to 8 teams competing.
Okay.
And so, for example, there's this whole section about the 5-team scenario.
Yeah.
It goes into detail about how, so after the initial rounds, the top team, they actually end up facing off against the 4th-ranked team in the semifinals.
You'd think they'd want to save the 2 strongest teams for the final.
Right. That was my first thought, too. But, the more you look at the big picture of what they were trying to do with this event, it kind of makes sense.
How so?
Well, they were really going for this balance, right? Excitement, but also fairness no matter what your skill level was.
Right. I see.
So by pitting that top team against, what's likely a weaker opponent in the semis, they're increasing the chances of a really, a nail-biter final matchup.
I get it. Strategy.
Exactly. And speaking of interesting strategies, did you catch what they gave out as a prize for the winning team?
I did, yeah. Definitely not your typical trophy.
A bottle of I.J. Berg sand.
Pretty creative, I got to give them that.
Right. You don't see that every day. It's like a little piece of the location to take home with you.
A true souvenir.
Exactly. And speaking of the location, those first-hand accounts we got our hands on, sounds like there were some pretty memorable moments.
Oh, definitely.
Like this one guy, John Hine, he mentioned his parents getting so into it, they just had to join in the boot and spellin', basically, outdoor play.
They weren't even competing.
Nope. Sounds like this event had a certain, contagious energy or something.
I could see that.
And then, get this, there was an incident involving a wing foiler.
A what foiler?
Wing foiler. It's like picture a surfboard, but with a sail attached. Those things can really fly across the water.
Oh, okay.
So apparently, one took an unexpected dip during the event.
Oh, no. Were they all right?
Totally fine, just a little soaked. But it just goes to show you, even with all the planning, the organization, these unexpected things, they just become part of the story.
Adds to the excitement, I suppose.
Right. Speaking of which, Mateno, in his account, he used the phrase hilarious taferlin. Hilarious scenes, basically. Seems like laughter was a bit of a theme.
It does seem that way.
And did any of the accounts actually say who won the whole thing?
We did, yeah. The team that walked away with that bottle of IJ Berg sand, it was a mix of folks from Pampas, TOR, and WV IJ Berg.
Really? So that random team assignment really shook things up.
Definitely did. And speaking of shaking things up, what if this whole bottle of sand thing, what if this catches on?
You think?
Yeah. What if this is the start of some new trend in, like, sports awards?
Like hyper-local trophies?
Yeah.
I kind of love it.
Instead of some generic trophy, you get something that really ties you back to that event.
A miniature Golden Gate Bridge if you win a race in San Francisco.
Or a jar of Bondi Beach seawater.
Here you go. See? Endless possibilities.
Exactly. But okay, seriously though, it does make you think about, like, the people behind events like this. It's not just about the competition, you know? It's like they want to create this whole experience.
A celebration of the sport, the community.
And just a lot of fun from the sounds of it.
Definitely. And that actually reminds me, we were talking about those randomly assigned teams earlier. We touched on the community aspect, but
Right.
But what about the strategic side of things? Imagine you show up, you're paired with these rowers you've never even met before.
Right. Talk about a wild card. You've got to figure out everyone's strengths. Their, let's call them rowing quirks. All on the fly.
It's like one of those trust fall team building exercises, but with like way higher stakes.
And probably a much better view.
And a lot more water.
Definitely. But it highlights something really important about coastal rowing, especially in this beach sprint format. It's not just about physical strength. It's a mental game, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Strategic thinking, split-second decisions, clear communication with your team.
Yeah.
You need it all to succeed.
Especially with those North Sea winds doing their thing, I imagine even the best laid plans
can go right out the window, which I think makes it even more interesting, both for the rowers and anyone watching.
Absolutely. You can prepare all you want, but sometimes you just got to roll with it. Adapt, which honestly, isn't that true for just about everything in life?
Words to live by.
So for those listening, next time you stumble across like a rowing event, don't just watch the muscles, you know. Pay attention to the strategy unfolding, the communication, or sometimes even the lack of it. It's fascinating.
It really is. A lot more going on beneath the surface than you might think.
See what I did there?
Uh-huh.
But seriously, maybe this deep dive will inspire some of you to like grab a couple of friends, rent a boat, give coastal rowing a shot.
Sounds like a plan. Just maybe check the wind forecast first.
Always good advice. And hey, if you do go, maybe pack a bottle. You never know what you might find to put in it.
Exactly.
This has been the deep dive, taking you beyond the headlines, beyond the surface, into the heart of what makes coastal rowing so unique. We'll see you next time.
Until